All right, welcome to Steeler Country. I am Tony Serino. Today we are doing a breakdown of the Steelers' defensive performance in their preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Happy to have everyone here today. If you're watching live, thank you for joining live. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you as well. If you'd rather have this, if you're watching this live on YouTube, thank you. If you're not, if you're listening to this on audio form, you can head over to YouTube and check us out there, Steeler Country with Tony Serino. If you want to check this out in audio form, I'm also going to put this up as a podcast. So find it wherever you find podcasts. Search Steeler Country with Tony Serino. You can find me there. I know last week we had some technical difficulties with the show as far as the microphone dropping in and out. I'm going to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. I think I have that figured out entirely this week. But if it does happen again, let me know in chat. I have a backup setup that we can go to. If this microphone is on its last legs, might need to get a new one, something like that. But regardless, let's get into this one. I'll start talking about this. Actually, okay, one more thing before we break down the defense, because I do want to mention this about this game. There were a couple players that I loved in this matchup that weren't Steelers. I thought Trevor Lawrence. I know that they had some success. Both the Jaguars did. They had a ton of long drives in this one, and that was both through the passing game and the running game. Want to give a shout out to Trevor Lawrence. Holy cow, did he make some throws in this game? Kind of reminded you like, oh yeah, right. This guy was one of the most sought after number one overall picks in a while, right? The tank for Trevor thing, how good this kid looked at Clemson for so many years. And then he comes out and, he was I don't say it was a bust last year. It was a disappointment last year, but I thought he made some really big throws in this one. Some wow throws, certainly. And then Travis Etienne, his teammate at Clemson, I thought, Etienne was the guy who coming out was kind of this game breaker type. You thought about, okay, they can get him in space. We know what he could do at Clemson and the game breaking speed that he had. But the contact balance he showed in this one, I thought was also a plus. And he broke some tackles in this one that I wouldn't necessarily say were poor attempts on the Steelers' part. I thought it was just good plays on Etienne's part. So wanted to call that out first before we kind of get into this breakdown. Overall, I think I have more positive things to say this week than not, certainly about the starting 11. I mean, I think there's some things on the back end of this roster we can get into. But, when it comes to the starting guys, I got a lot of nice things to say. And if you saw the banner, if you saw the headline of today's show, yeah, we're going to start right there. Because you want to talk linebacker. So do I. I want to talk linebacker today. What a difference a week makes, doesn't it? A week ago, all of us were kind of, oh, no, Devin Bush, Robert Spillane, one of these guys has to start. And this week, I thought both guys played well. I thought they were above the line players. Especially, we'll start with Devin Bush. Yeah, as I said last week, here's a guy who's around the ball, just allergic to playmaking. And I was, obviously very upset about that and the disappointment that it is that here we are, year 5, he's never turned it around. Or sorry, year 4. And he's never become the player they drafted him to be. But, in watching this game and kind of reassessing what he did against Seattle, not saying he had a good game against Seattle, he did not. But the fact that he was around the ball so much in that game, probably should have been more of a positive, because I thought that did play itself out in this game where, once again, around the ball and made some plays in this one. Not the kind of game-breaking, the Miles Jack type plays or the plays you want to see from a 10th overall pick. But the best thing to say about Devin Bush in this game is that he was solid, right? This was the kind of player who you'd be happy if you get that performance every week alongside a guy like Miles Jack. No, Devin Bush is not a playmaker, right? And I think we need to probably reassess how we evaluate Devin Bush, right? If you consider this, how do we assess Terrell Edmunds right now? Going back, and if we go back to 2017 when he was drafted, those first couple years of Edmunds, everyone really got on him. And it was because the expectations were set as the Steelers needed a playmaker at safety, and he was clearly not that guy. But I think as Edmunds' career has gone on, I think we kind of understand who Edmunds is as a player. I think everyone now is kind of fine with, all right, he's not a great safety. He's not a playmaker. You're never going to put him up there as a top safety in this league. But he's a cog in the wheel, and he's not someone who you're going to really think about as a massive liability on this team. And for me with Devin, now the Steelers have Miles Jack. If Devin could at least kind of level out this year to a player who's not a huge liability, who can be around the football, who can make some things in the running game harder for opposing offenses, I think that's going to be okay for me. Again, in coverage, he can be around the ball and make some plays. Maybe not be, a guy who's going to get a ton of pass breakups or big interceptions, that kind of thing. But if he can just be solid, that'll be what the Steelers need. And I think the worst thing you'll say about Devin Bush this week, well, the biggest problem for Devin, I should say, is that the two guys behind him, and Robert Spillane and Mark Robinson, arguably played even better than Devin did. Spillane, I tweeted during the game, I said, the Robert Spillane versus Devin Bush, whoever wins, we lose. I got a lot of flack for that because, of course, by the end of that, I think I tweeted it in like the first quarter, maybe the first drive. And by the end of the game, of course, both guys had decent games. But, the point there was like with Devin, we know, okay, we got this guy who's kind of allergic to playmaking. And in Spillane, you got this guy who you just know athletically, it's like, okay, there's a whole bunch of things you don't want Robert Spillane doing as a middle linebacker because athletically, he's not going to be able to do it. Coming out of this game, like that tweet was probably really silly, certainly premature. Spillane showed a nice veteran savvy in this game of kind of, as I talked about last week, right? His feet betray his brain. I thought in this game, his brain helped his feet out a little bit. There were so many times where in coverage he was able to stay with the receiver. Stay with the receiver. There's a box. If you drew a box on the field, right? We talk about the box. If you keep Robert Spillane in that box, I think he could be a really solid player. If you take Robert Spillane out of that box, right? If you want him to be kind of the seam linebacker where he's kind of running with a tight end down the field, that's not where you want him. You don't want him kind of running sideline to sideline with a linebacker. But if you can kind of keep him in his zone coverage where it's, where you're kind of limiting where he has to be on the field. And certainly, in the running game, we know what he can do there. If they're going to run between the tackles, that is Robert Spillane territory. That's where you want him that's where he's at his best. And I thought that's what he did on Saturday night. I thought that, they kind of kept him in that box. He did a good job of staying free, running to the ball and making plays. He led the team in tackles, right? He had 6 tackles? He had 6 tackles, but the better stat here is stops. He had 4 stops in this game, which I think is a better stat. If you don't know what stops are, it's a stat, I believe, created by a Pro Football Focus. So I don't like, tackles to me are kind of a silly stat because we lose all context. It's one of these, it's one of these stats like total yards where, okay, having a lot of tackles is probably not a bad thing because someone has to tackle a player. Just like getting a lot of yards is probably not a bad thing, but not all yards are created the same. And if I got 10 yards on 3rd and 20, that's not as good as getting 10 yards on 3rd and 5. Right? We can all agree on that. So there's context that gets lost when we just talk about total yards. I think the same thing can be said about total tackles. Total tackles to me, it's somewhat of a meaningless stat. Where did you make that tackle? Did you make that tackle, 5 yards in the backfield or 2 yards into the play, or did you make it 20 yards into the play? I think that kind of stuff matters, and that's what stops attempts to measure. So if you understand success rate being the way that we measure an offense and their ability to stay ahead of the chains, right? So ahead of the chains being, you want to stay, 1st and 10 to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 5 to 3rd and 1, 3rd and 1 to 1st down, right? So we measure that by using success rate, which says, did you get at least 40% of the yards you needed on 1st down, 50% of the yards you needed on 2nd down, and then 100% of the yards you needed on 3rd down? If you did any of those things, that's a successful play, right? So we're doing it on a play-by-play basis. If it's 1st down, did you get 40% of the yards you needed? On 2nd down, did you get 50% of the yards you needed? 3rd down, did you get 100%? And so we can then use success rate on defense to measure kind of the effectiveness of a tackle. Because did the tackle result in an unsuccessful play? Therefore, what PFF calls a stop. So think about this now. Robert Spillane, who had 6 tackles, 4 of them were stops. I thought it was a very good performance from Robert. And it certainly kind of heats up this battle again because last week I thought Robert had such a poor game from an athleticism standpoint that it was almost like they're going to go with Devin by default. He's not a playmaker, but he's around the ball, so whatever. They'll just put him out there. But I thought Spillane having a nice game like this certainly kind of re-energizes this battle as we get into this final preseason game against the Detroit Lions. But you had another player throw their hat in the ring. And no, it wasn't my boy Buddy Johnson. I know I made a big deal last week. I thought Buddy could really turn a corner. And I thought, here's a guy who just felt a little hesitant, but he's in the right place. If he just played with a little more aggression, I think he could really pop. That player did exist. That player did have it. That did happen at the linebacker position on Saturday. It wasn't Buddy Johnson. It was Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson, the rookie out of Ole Miss. Holy cow. Look, the best thing I'll say about Mark Robinson is there's like a line you can draw in the tape. You turn that tape back on from Saturday's game and rewatch it. There's kind of before Mark Robinson's on the field and after. Because once Mark Robinson gets on the field, you can't take your eyes off this kid. You talk about the game slowing down for him, playing with more aggression, always around the football. It's so fun that Vince Williams called him out on Twitter and said, Mark is even better than me as a rookie. Because I did get a little Vince Williams vibes from Mark, and just the way that he kind of flies and throws his body around out there. He himself had 3 tackles, all of them stops. 3 tackles, all stops. And I thought he was very good in coverage as well. Something he struggled with a week ago. I still kind of worry maybe from a pure athleticism standpoint, if he's really the kind of coverage linebacker you want. But again, the Steelers are not kind of going to be picky choosy with linebackers at this point. They need consistency next to Miles Jack. Miles Jack is going to be their playmaker at linebacker. What they need is consistency alongside him. I don't know Mark Robinson is actually in the battle. As people ask, has this been a thing in any of the press conferences this week? I guess I haven't watched enough of Tomlin stuff this week. If people are asking about, hey, what do you think about Mark? Do you consider Mark in a battle or anything like that? Because, as I said, throughout camp, he would have plays like this, right? There will be times throughout camp practice where you would say, yo, who was that? Oh, that was Mark Robinson, right? It did feel like that Saturday's performance was him kind of putting that all together. We talked about this with Kenny, where he was kind of building good practice on good practice, and then it kind of came together in these preseason games. I think with Robinson, you certainly saw that. But I don't know if he's actually going to win the battle. But it's a fun player to have on this roster, and someone who, as a rookie, you're hoping he can build on this. As far as the other linebackers on the team, Marcus Allen didn't play in this game whatsoever. Buddy Johnson, kind of same thing. He was better than last week for sure, but at this point he's kind of lost in the shuffle at linebacker. And so yeah, this was good performances, I thought, from Spillane, Bush, Robinson. By the way, Miles Jack had a good game as well. I don't want to sit here and say Miles Jack did not have a good game. He did, but I think the stars of the show were Bush, Spillane, and Robinson. All right, move on here. I want to talk about safeties for a second, because the other guy in this game that really stood out on tape, really popped throughout pretty much the entire game, was Terrell Edmunds. We talked about him a little earlier as being this guy who I think we all kind of evaluated him on a kind of the wrong standard when he came out. Here's a guy who was once in the run game, just kind of coming downhill at the ball. Tomlin always talks about wanting to dominate the line of scrimmage and how much that's an emphasis for this team this year, stopping the run. Terrell Edmunds took that to heart for sure. He himself had 5 tackles, 4 stops. He was all over the place in the running game. I think the only tackle he had that wasn't a stop probably should have been a stop, but I believe Etienne, that was the one where Etienne kind of eked out of the tackle, did a good job of kind of breaking free and getting some extra yards afterwards. Otherwise, I mean, Edmunds was all over the place. And by the way, he had all those tackles, and I think all those tackles were in the box, but he didn't play box. It wasn't like he was just, box safety the entire game. I believe he played 16 reps in the box and then 17 reps at free safety. And we've seen this over time with Edmunds as the Steelers feel more and more comfortable playing him as a deep safety, rotating Minka down into the box, or whether it was, Edmunds and Casey playing together and rotating Casey down into the box and playing Edmunds as that deep safety. And I think, when you consider what Casey did in this game, which was, once again, I think, he's so good as a downhill player. He's listed as a free safety, but the guy can play as a strong safety for sure. And now all of a sudden you're talking about a safety unit for the Steelers where you have Edmunds and you have Minka, but we've talked about this. Like, Casey's playing too well to just sit the bench and be like, if someone gets hurt, we'll put him in there. And you saw this in the game. They had all three guys on the field at the same time. They moved Edmonds down into the box, and they had Casey and Minka as the two safeties on the play. But realistically, as we get into the regular season, if they're really going to use that package, and I don't want to make too much of this because potentially that was something we see in the preseason, like the dollar defense, and then it just goes bye-bye. But you talk about the kind of disguises and all that Tomlin wants to do, and how much he loves players who have that position flexibility, who can play all over the place. Well, we know Minka last year did such a good job in run defense, became a real plus run defender because he was, he had to, by necessity. Last year, he just turned himself into a plus run defender. So we know he can come down and play in the box. Of course he can. As can Edmonds, as can Casey. And now all of a sudden you have three players who you feel comfortable with them in any of those situations. And so you can kind of mix and match. You can have all three guys on the field and kind of move them around and let opposing offenses have to kind of guess as to who's got what responsibility on a play-to-play basis. That's the kind of thing that Tomlin and these defenses do so well. I think Tomlin's going to be very happy with what he saw at Edmonds, because I think it's going to ease ease some of the concerns I'm sure he has about the movement that he wants out of his safeties. The other safety here, Trey Norwood, we talked a lot about him last week. Not a great performance from Trey in this game. But I think he's still going to be, a big part of the Steelers' dime defense. I don't think one performance like this is going to really set him back, because he's had so many plus performances. You talk about the end of last season and now into what he did last week. This certainly was a disappointment for him, but I don't think this kind of sets him back in any sort of major way. So, all right, that's where they are with safety. They did at safety. They cut Donovan Steiner and they signed Elijah Scott, which was an interesting play and potentially could be something to watch for when we get to the 53, because safety's a room. The four guys I talked about, I think they're all making the roster. I would be shocked if any of the four guys I talked about, Minka, Edmonds, Casey, and Norwood, I'd be shocked if any of those guys don't make the 53. But you also have Miles Killebrew, who's a core special teamer. Now they bring in this guy, Elijah Scott, off of waivers. Watch for, I think safety all of a sudden becomes a randomly just like, there's a 53-man roster battle here on this. So watch for that as we get into this game against the Detroit Lions. All right, let's go over to spend some time on the edge rusher real quick, because we got to talk about Jannard Avery, who got cut this week. I was shocked to see that Jannard Avery got cut, considering what he did on tape on Saturday. I mean, I could not wrap my head around how they could have watched that performance and they said, nah, that's one of the first guys to get cut. And my first thought was, well, maybe that's not what happened. Maybe it was some kind of injury that he got, and they just, they knew he wasn't going to make it back in time for the regular season. So, okay, we'll cut you now and we'll move on here at edge rush, because this third edge rusher is such a big part of the need of this defense. But that's not the case. The Bucs signed him like 48 hours later. So no injury concerns there, right? He's just right on the Tampa Bay roster. So in rewatching the All-22 of Avery, I think the reason why he got cut is it goes back to the idea of the emphasis that Mike Tomlin is putting on this team and being a quality run defense unit. It's almost like Tomlin cares far more this season, far more about the run defense than he does the pass rush. Because if he cared anything about the pass rush, Jannard Avery was the best player on the field. TJ Watt was the best player on the field. Let me back up for 1 second. TJ Watt was only out there for like 12 plays. He had an amazing sack. Okay, TJ is the best player on the field. But right behind him, Jannard Avery. I mean, Jannard Avery had 5 pressures in this game. I thought he did a great job of timing the rush. We know about his speed. We know about his burst off the line of scrimmage, but he made it so hard for those tackles in their back pedal to try and stay with him and not let him turn the corner, the bend that he has. And I just thought, okay, you can't cut a player that's that good. When you talk about behind that, we got Derek Tusco, we got Hamilcar Rashed, we got Rondale Carter, Delonte Scott. What are the Steelers doing with their third edge rusher spot if they don't have Jannard Avery? Because where is the pass rush going to come from? We've already got Highsmith, who's out. He likely won't play until week 1. He won't play in this game against Detroit, and he's hoping to come back in time for week 1. So what is he going to do? And I think Mike Tomlin's thesis here is I cannot have a player at edge rusher who cannot contain the edge in run defense or allow quarterbacks to break contain, because that was another thing that I thought Avery did really poorly on Saturday. He was a negative in the run defense, and he let Lawrence kind of get outside on multiple occasions. And I think that ultimately, I do think that that's kind of what Tomlin saw on tape and said, no, I can't have this. We're not going to have another year of being one of the worst run defenses in the National Football League because we got an edge rusher who can't seal the edge, just can't have it. And so, Avery's off this roster. And I think you look beyond that, though, because not just Avery being bad. I thought Hamilcar Rashad was very good in run defense in this game. And Tuska, by the way, Tuska gets all this bad rap now because he seems like he's going to be outside linebacker 3 or edge rusher number 3. And I get it. Tuska, to me on tape, is fine. He's a fine player. He's not going to light the world on fire. Solid in run defense. I even think as a pass rusher, he has some juice. There's something there. Even if he's never going to be an elite guy. He's never going to be a guy who's going to get you anywhere close to double digit. But he could be a nice 4th. There's probably still room on this roster for this. If the Steelers feel like they can get another edge when we get down to the 53-man cuts and someone gets cut, I think there's still a possibility they bring someone in. But I do think that this is, if you're thinking the Steelers are going to go out and get another Melvin Ingram type where it's, pass rush specialist. Well, I mean, I don't want to say Ingram was a bad run defender a year ago, but you know what I'm saying? Like if the expectation that we have as fans is that the Steelers are going to go out and prioritize, okay, I need to get a pass rush specialist for those times when Watt or Highsmith can't play. I think our expectations may be a little off on this one because that guy was Jannard Avery. That guy was clearly Jannard Avery. I think they're prioritizing run defense here, and it's certainly as we watch this game against the Lions coming up. I think that to me that's kind of what I'm going to be watching more when it comes to these edge rushers and who's going to win this battle. Because Rondale Carter, Delonte Scott, I thought Scott had a much better game in this one. We talked about it last week. What a poor performance he put up against Seattle. I thought he was better in this one. And so, I'm not going to rule out here that someone like a Delonte Scott or Rondale Carter could have a big game and make their way onto the 53. But I'm not going to say that if they go out there and are a great pass rusher, but, open up big holes in the running game. Like that's, again, my mind is kind of shifting on how the Steelers are approaching this position. Let's go over to cornerback. Cornerback's an interesting spot. There was one player at corner who I was kind of shocked at how poor he played. So I really like this guy. And I don't want to build too much out of this, but I thought Cam Sutton was really bad in this game. I thought Cam had it was really bad. The guy played like, 30 snaps or something like that. I'll say he had a really bad game. But there was a couple moments where he just did not come out of his break well. There were those couple plays where the corner the receiver ran the out route. One, he just tripped coming out, and the other one, he was just really slow to turn the corner. By the way, neither play were completed, but again, this is preseason. Let's not be results oriented here, right? The idea going back to the kind of where this corner room sits today. Ahkello Witherspoon is going to be an outside corner for this team. There's no doubt in my mind about that. There's nothing he's done in preseason that would tell me that he's going to have this kind of massive fall off from what he was a year ago, where he was a borderline shutdown guy for those 6 games, to someone who can't play, right? I mean, I think Witherspoon is certainly CB1 on this team. And I think Levi Wallace has done enough. I thought he was, Levi Wallace might be my favorite corner on this roster, to be quite honest with you, because I like his kind of savvy or feel for the play or feel for the ball, however you want to say it, right? Just kind of understanding the receiver and when he's going to make his break so that he can drive on the ball. I've talked about this a million times. Levi Wallace ran a 4.65 40 coming out of Bama. You think about how the modern NFL is with all the speed and everything we see at wide receiver these days. You think about a 4.65 corner. I mean, a lot of teams would just say we just cannot put that guy on the field, period. Period, end of story. You run 4.65 is just disqualifying at the position. But Levi's got that savvy to him where, again, I think he did a great job on this game of kind of mirroring the receiver, watching him and as he came out of his break and then driving on the football. Love his game. I like Levi Wallace. I'm coming around on Levi Wallace a lot. I think he was a guy for me who throughout camp was like, all right, prove it to me that you can be a solid outside corner for this team. Now all of a sudden, I think not only is he proving it, he's kind of winning me over as kind of one of my favorites in this room. But going back to Sutton, they're gonna want to move him inside in those nickel situations. Right? He'll play in the slot. In the slot, your ability to move in short areas is a big part of being a slot defender. I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill here with Sutton. I thought this was not his best performance, certainly. But we'll see. Yeah, again, like I said, I don't want to build too much. I thought it was a minus game, certainly for Cam. As I said, with a kilo, CB1 for me right now. I mean, there's nothing happened in this game, certainly. Was he even targeted in this game? I think he was targeted on the long one. They might have called him targeted on the one. It was just a designed rollout. And Akilo was over there in coverage. But, I mean, this was not exactly them picking on Akilo by any stretch. The other interesting thing at corner, going to the kind of second tier, Justin Lane is playing behind Chris Steele at this point. Justin Lane seems like he's on his way out of this roster, just completely. Steele got the second team reps alongside James Pierre. Steele had, he got credit with the pass breakup. Now, was that a pass breakup? It was just kind of a prayer ball from CJ Beathard where Steele was in coverage. He did a good job playing the ball in the air. I'm not going to take that away from him. But the interesting part to me here is Steele seems like a kind of player who's headed for the practice squad, and Lane seems like his kind of player who's headed for nowhere. James Pierre, I thought was he was fine in this game, solid. I think that the corner room at this point, 5 guys that we know are, I don't see any other way around it. Maybe they keep 6 with Steele, but you got Akilo, you got Levi, you got Cam, you got Mollett, and you got Pierre, and the rest of the group. I mean, like I said, maybe Steele works his way onto the 53, but otherwise, I think that room is maybe just a done deal. And then we go over to the defensive line. Maybe a whole hum game for them. I like to see Alualu back out there. Yeah, I mean, I know I've kind of gotten on him throughout this entire process of like, they're going to put all this on a 35-year-old who's coming off of a season. I mean, yeah, that's true. I still have question marks about his longevity this season and how long, or how healthy he can stay, how many minutes he can give this team, how many reps he can give this team, I should say. But he was good. His kind of strength at the point of attack, so to kind of stay in his gap, man, he's a good one. He is a good one. It was something where, when you talk about how well the guys behind played this week, Devin and Robinson and Spillane, there is a part of it where you probably do have to draw a straight line between like Henry Mondo didn't get a lot of looks in this game and the linebackers played really well. It's like, are those two things related? Yes. But I like to see Alualu back out there. He's a good player, man. Even at 35 years of age, still got it. Wormley, I thought, had a much, much better game in this. I thought this was back to the Chris Wormley that we knew and loved. And again, this is the same kind of thing as I'll say about Cam Sutton, right? Where I don't want to make Wormley had a bad game last week, but you don't want to make too much out of that because one preseason game does not erase everything we know about a player who's had as long a career in Pittsburgh as Chris Wormley's had. Same thing with Cam Sutton. So Cam had a bad game in this one. Very easily he could bounce back. And certainly as we get into the regular season, don't want to make too much out of that. Loved. I liked what I saw out of Wormley. The only D lineman that I think is going to make the team that I was disappointed in was Isaiah Loudermilk, and that's just because I was hoping that he would kind of build on what he did last week. Another guy who I thought had real nice play strength at the point of attack, was able to kind of bull rush and drive defenders into the backfield. Saw less of that this week. Faced a little more double teams this week. He was fine. Again, I'm not saying that he had a bad game. It was one of those things where this is a guy who, if you watch me on Locked On Steelers, me and Chris Carter, we were starting a hype train over there. And the hype train was about to leave the station after what I saw last week. If he could build on that, didn't do that yet. But I still have hopes for Loudermilk as another depth piece on this D line. And then there's DeMarvin Leal. DeMarvin Leal is going to be a good player in this league. It's just a question of how long does it take for him to kind of round out his full game. But I think I talked about this last week about him being a specialty pass rusher on that defensive line. Man, yes, that is that's him for sure. I think in run defense, he's a bit of a liability. He's one of these guys who, they just want to penetrate, right? They just want to penetrate up the field, and at times that bites them in the ass because you look behind, it's like, oh, that was my gap. Shit. Oh, well, all right, that's on me. That's E1. And I thought Leal had a couple too many of those in the run game, but as a pass rusher, this kid's got some juice. This kid's got some juice as a pass rusher. I don't know how long it takes for him to really win over the coaching staff to want to put him out there. Let's say it's like a 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8 situation. Do you want Leal on the field, considering that at this point, I think he might be a little too much of a liability in the running game. But if it's 3rd and 15 out there, and whatever, Hayward needs a breather, Ogunjobi needs a breather, give me DeMarvin Leal in those situations. Oh, and talking about Ogunjobi for a second, I might need to apologize to Larry, because I said last week, let's not build him up as this kind of great run defender. And while I wouldn't say he was a great run defender in this game, I thought he made some plays. I think he made some plays in the running game that were fine. I still don't think he's going to be a great run defender, but he certainly, I don't think he's going to be as much of the negative that I thought. He's still much like Leal. He has those plays where he wants to penetrate. It's like, oh, well, that was me. But yeah, I thought Ogunjobi was fine in the running game this week. It was certainly not a situation where, like we saw last week, Henry Mondo comes out there and is like, oh no, Henry Mondo, yikes. There was no real yikes player on that defensive line. Again, I thought a lot of the big runs that came were mostly ETN just being a quality, he was a quality back in this game. Let's see, did I miss anyone? I think that's it. I think I nailed everything I wanted to talk about today. Let me check my notes real quick. Might be a quick one today. So we'll check over in chat. See if anybody has if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, or anything, let me know in chat. I'll do a little Q&A here, and then we'll wrap it up. Kenny says, why is Derek Watt still on the team? Well, easy. This is an easy one. This is a layup. He's a great special team player. Great. What did I do here? Hold on. I got to get rid of this banner before I can put these chats up. Technical difficulties again. He's a great special teamer. He's a core special teamer. Now, I'm not going to say it. I was going to say maybe he doesn't make the roster but it would only, if he doesn't make the roster, it would only be for salary cap purposes, because I think he's in the last year of his deal, and the Steelers could save a couple $1 million bucks, and they could roll that over into next year. But no. Jennifer says, I don't think Devin was all that bad. His mouth makes it worse. This week, not bad at all. I would if Devin Bush could do what he did on Saturday for 17 games this week, I'd be completely fine with that. Are there highlight plays? Are there plays that we're all thinking about right now? Like, oh man, remember when Devin made that one play? No. In fact, I don't even know that any of us could go back and think about exactly and describe one of Devin's great plays or good plays in this game. But it was fine. It was just solid, right? Same thing with Robert. Robert had a bunch of plays in this game where, there was the one that I'll give credit to Robert for, because it is something he struggled with in the past. Is they were running the crosser to Christian Kirk, and that was his, and it was Robert's responsibility as he came across to take him on the crosser. And I thought, what Robert did there is he did a great job of recognizing, the crosser's coming, and kind of getting a little bit of a head start, or however you want to put it, to stay with him stride for stride, so that it wasn't a situation where, because again, Robert cannot get himself in a situation where you got a crosser of a receiver coming across the field and he's late to the play. Guys like Devin Bush could probably make up for that because they have this athleticism. Robert doesn't have that. And so, again, I would take what I saw on Saturday from this linebacking core all season long. It's about consistency at this point. This is one game, right? Much like you don't want to look, we don't want, I was probably too negative a week ago about this linebacking core. I don't want to sit here today and say, well, it's all fixed and we've got the greatest linebacking core in the AFC North. And I want to redo the rankings over there on AFC North Talk. Again, it was a bad performance a week ago. It's a good performance today. Let's find a happy medium and just, figure this thing out in the long term. It's about consistency at this point. Oh, hopefully I didn't break the mic right there. I ended up punching it. Kenny says Devin needs to play fearless like he did at Michigan. This is again, I think we have to, I would love for that to happen. I would love for that Devin Bush to show up again. But I think I don't think that player, I don't think it's realistic. I just don't think that that's who Devin Bush is right now. But if Devin can just be a jag, as they say, right? Just a guy. That's all they're going to be. Oh, here we go. DN, yeah, this is what he, any correlation between the increased playing time for Alualu and the elevated play for inside linebackers. Let me see how many plays did Alualu even play in this game? Because I don't know that it was that many. It was 17 plays for Alualu in this one. So he was only on the field for 17 plays. Other there were more than 17 quality reps from Devin and Mark and all those guys. So I think there's probably some correlation there, certainly. But, well, and how many reps did Mondo get? Well, I don't want to say, Mondo didn't even have that bad a game, to be quite honest with you. Let's see. Mondo played 28 reps in this game. But yeah, I mean, there's probably some correlation there. Only 17 reps though. It's not a 1-to-1. Doc Holliday said Avery turned into another Ingram. I don't know that Avery wanted off. I mean, well, I don't know. Is there a rumor out there that Avery wanted off the team? Remember, Ingram wanted out. Ingram requested a trade and said, I want out of here. He wasn't going to beat out Highsmith, so he wanted out. Did Avery want out? Did Avery think he was going to beat Highsmith too? Does every player in the National Football League think they're better than Alex Highsmith? Is that what we're dealing with in Pittsburgh? You can't bring in a player who doesn't think I can beat out Alex Highsmith. No, I think, like I said before, I think this is more about run defense than it was about pass rush. Doc also says the linebackers are so thin. Okay, well, depends on if you're talking about edge rusher, the outside linebackers, or if you're talking about the edge rushers, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to argue that that's not thin. It is very thin there. I don't know that I feel great about Hamilcar or Tuska coming off the bench. I mean, both of them are just fine. I think I'm much more. I still want the Steelers to have a nice pass rusher coming off. I mean, I'm not. I know Tomlin has this whole, we're going to be a great run defense team. And so I have to adjust my evaluation there because we can all just get on here and say, this guy's a great pass rusher. He's going to make it. This is the mistake that every Steeler media analyst made, which is that we all just assumed, the Steelers want a third edge rusher that can rush the passer. That's what they're looking for. And so we all just kind of penciled, not even penciled. I mean, we wrote in permanent ink, Avery is making the 53. No doubt about this. Everyone was saying that. I said it, right? The mistake we made is to not evaluate him more as a run defender first and then look at his pass rush. And so we all just missed the fact that, right, the Steelers, they want their edge rushers to be run defenders right now. And again, this is my thesis, and we'll see if this plays out when they get cut down to the 53. But I think that's where the Steelers are right now. And I think if we're going to evaluate this Lions game, like I said before, if we're going to evaluate the edge rushers in this Lions game, I think we need to look at edge rusher first before we look at pass rush when we're saying who's going to make this 53 and who's not, or even whether or not the Steelers feel like they have a deep room or a thin room. Now, if you're talking about inside linebackers, they are thin. Yeah, they are thin. They are thin, and they're thin because they don't even have a second starter right now. They as much as we'll say about Spillane and Bush in this football game, it's just one game. It's one preseason game. I think that's still the biggest question mark on this defense. Still, the number one question mark on this defense is who's playing alongside Myles Jack and how good is that player going to be? Because once again, much like we'll talk about the left guard spot, and we'll do another show probably tomorrow night to preview this Lions game and talk about all the position battles and who can win what, right? Just because you win a position battle doesn't mean you're a good player. Kevin Dotson won the left guard spot, but is Kevin Dotson good? If Devin Bush ends up winning this battle, is Devin Bush a good player because he beat out Robert Spillane? If Spillane beats out Devin Bush, does that mean Spillane's good? Not necessarily. I liked what I saw from them. And again, I think this is something to build on with the linebacking core. You want to see this level of consistency into this week. It's a big week. I mean, again, this is a group that's going to decide the starter against Detroit. That we'll talk about the quarterback, and that battle could be won in this week. I think left guard's probably done. This is the biggest battle on the roster right now. Guard is the biggest inside linebacker is the biggest battle on the roster. Devin Bush versus Robert Spillane, and maybe you throw Mark Robinson in there. It's like maybe. Okay. Doc says, I did hear that Avery and Tomlin had a heated discussion about the position. This is an interesting. I had not heard this. Yeah, I mean, this would make sense too, right? I mean, Tomlin is not going to put up with that, especially from a player like Avery, who at best is going to be the third edge rusher. So if this was an off the field thing, it's an off the field concern, that makes a lot of sense too. Hadn't heard that, but yeah, I mean, that would make a ton of sense. Beast Mode here says Quincy Roche. The rumor is he may not make the Giants 53 because of the new regime. I hope that's what they're watching. Yeah, there's a couple guys that were. So Pro Football Focus wrote that article the other day where they kind of scoured, the reports from camp and put together a list of players that were, surprising cuts they could be. The two guys that really stood out to me on that list, obviously Quincy Roche has to stand out on that list because Quincy Roche was drafted in the 6th round by the Steelers a year ago. I loved what Quincy Roche did at the Senior Bowl. I thought he had a good preseason last year. I thought he could have been a player who easily could have made the 53 a year ago. I was kind of surprised that they didn't put him on the 53. I think their plan there was to stash him on the practice squad, but they kind of lost out. And what's silly about that is they've done this a couple times now. They did that with Tuzar, including they like Tuzar, right? I mean, the idea with Tuzar wasn't that they cut him because we just didn't like him. They liked him a lot. They brought him back. Tuzar Skipper was on the roster this year before he got hurt, so they like Tuzar. They like his skill set. They weren't done with him, but they tried to get cute in this 53-man stuff, and they pay for that at times at this position specifically. They did that a year ago with Roche. Yeah, I'm interested to see. Roche would be a player who I'd like to come back. He played good minutes for the Giants last year, and I liked his skill set coming out. So I hope that they can bring him back. The other guy that was on that list that I thought was it's not a good player, but I thought it was interesting that Alex Leatherwood was on that list. Now, Leatherwood has been just a massive, massive, massive disappointment coming out. But, high pedigree kid, right? Alabama. I think he was a 5-star recruit there. He played tackle for them. They tried moving him to guard in Vegas. It just has not worked out. So, I don't know that the Steelers need to bring in another player like that, right? I mean, they already have a draftee that just, they moved him to the Steelers already have a guy who they drafted and moved to multiple positions on the offensive line. It just has not worked out at any of them. But I guess, for me, it's the pedigree of Leatherwood, right? It's the fact that he was a quality high school recruit, started at Bama. Try to find if there's anything in there that can even, again, the Steelers just have this problem at guard right now where they may have a left guard that just can't play because, and by the way, this is not me trying to diss Kevin Dotson and say Dotson's not a good player. The problem for Dotson is he can't stay healthy. And so if Dotson doesn't stay healthy and they just have to go with Kendrick Green by default, no, thank you. No, thank you. All right. Beast Mode says like and subscribe. Indeed. If you're here on YouTube, do me a favor, like the video. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe as well. Be back here tomorrow to do a preview of the Lions game, talk about all the position battles that will be decided against the Lions. I think there are a lot of battles I think that have been decided. We'll talk about those, but we're also going to talk about QB1. Tomlin says QB1's on the table. Let's see if it really is. I'm excited if it is. Kenny time. Third running back spot, certainly. I mean, RB2 essentially is on the line in that game. Is wide receiver 6 on the line? What happens in this offensive line, especially at left guard? Not only left guard, but just as a depth on the roster. Who actually makes the roster on the offensive line? How many players do the Steelers have to go out and try to bring in at the end here? Remember, they've already tried to add two offensive linemen, at the end of camp here, just kind of bringing some dudes in like, hey, let's just throw some extra bodies at this and see if we make one stick. I think linebacker is a huge one here. And as I said, corner potentially between Steele and Lane, and then watch for that safety spot as well. So we'll talk about all that on tomorrow's show. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube, but you'd rather have this as an audio podcast, you can go wherever you find audio podcasts, search Steeler Country with Tony Stewart. I'm going to put this video or put this up as an audio podcast as well. And if you're listening to this as an audio podcast and you want to interact with the show, head on over to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Steeler Country with Tony Serino. You can be with us live here. I do this usually around 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. You can be a part of the chat, ask your questions here. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow to do a preview of the final preseason game, Steelers-Lions, right here on Steeler Country.